everyone, it is the 1st of December and I am going to attempt to do Vlogmas this year. I was a little concerned when looking at my schedule because I have two 20-page papers due on the 12th and a paper due on the 19th. So December is super busy for me. And last year I only had work to contend with. This year I have work and school and just kind of writing papers. So it's gonna be really busy. So I'm gonna cut back a bit on Vlogmas and I'm just gonna do a video every single weekday. I'm gonna give myself weekends off and I am gonna allow myself to pre-film. Last year I edited, uploaded, and like did everything in the same day. And that was really stressful and I can't do that this year. I'm actually filming this on the 30th of November because tomorrow I have like a 16-hour day between work and school and I'm not home. I don't have time to film. I have to be at work at like 5 o'clock in the morning. So yeah, this is being filmed at 6 o'clock at night before I go to bed in like an hour because I have to be up at 4. So I thought I'd start Vlogmas out strong and talk about the books that I read last month. I guess technically this month when I'm filming it. So I read 6 books, which is, a lot of them were read earlier on in the month. I kind of, as the month got on, I got busier and so I stopped reading as much, but I did get through quite a lot and I'm pretty happy with what I read. So the first book I read is of course the Thomas Hardy book. I read this with Yamini, Ange, and Katie, of course, and it was The Well-Beloved by Thomas Hardy. This is the second last Thomas Hardy novel that we had to read. This month's is going to be The Hand of Ethelberta, I think, and that's the very last Thomas Hardy book we have to read out of his entire bibliography. So that's kind of rather sad, but also it's relieving. This has been a big project and I'm going to talk about like projects and TBRs during Vlogmas. One of the reasons I really want to do Vlogmas is that I love doing videos and I haven't been able to do as much with grad school. But this was a really disappointing Hardy read and we all kind of agreed. It was a solid like 2 to 3 stars for pretty much all of us. The story was just, the main character basically, he falls in love with this idea of a woman which he calls the well-beloved, and it like travels from woman to woman, and he's kind of, it's very strange, and it involves him falling in love with different generations of the same family. So like his original like kind of love, and then her daughter, and then her daughter, and it's not good. I did not enjoy it very much. I mean, the writing, of course, is fantastic because it's Hardy, but yeah, it was not good. I mean, do it if you're gonna do Hardy's bibliography, but otherwise give it a pass. I'm also gonna quickly adjust the camera. I don't normally do this, but it's Vlogmas, so I can get a little crazy. I'm just gonna notice I was getting a little cropped out there. So then the next book that I read, I really enjoyed. And it is John Wyndham's The Midwich Cuckoos. I kind of read this as a bit of a change of pace because I was feeling a little like Victorian literature. I love it and everything, but I've read so much recently, I need a break. And I love John Wyndham, and this saved me so much because I am now writing my Cold War history paper on it, which those of you who like may or may not know, I am not a modern historian. I am an early modern historian, so I focus on like Renaissance, basically. So I had to take a Cold War class because it was all that was available, and I was racking my brains for what to write, and I read this early on in the month, and I have decided to write a paper, which I have to come up with a snappy title, so if you have suggestions for the title for this paper, let me know, but I'm really excited to write it, and it's basically post-colonial British views on the Third World during the Cold War through the lens of John Wyndham. And this book was the inspiration. I actually did a presentation on it today for my class, and I think it went pretty well. Like, I think my professor was like pretty impressed with how I like, did it. And I might do a video later on in this month talking about that paper once I get it written. But The Midwich Cuckoos is really interesting because it's speculative fiction, and basically the premise of the plot is the small town in Midwich in England falls asleep when a silver object kind of appears, like all the inhabitants fall asleep, and then one day later they all wake up and all the women of childbearing years are pregnant. So 9 months later, 31 boys and 30 girls are born. I think one child dies of complications in childbirth. And it's very evident that these are like, they don't share any of the genetic characteristics of their parents. They're clearly like other. They grow at an accelerated rate, they have telepathic powers, and they can control what other people do. And what's really interesting is how, like, Wyndham presents how British society deals with this situation and the othering, and there's definitely clear links to kind of race issues, because there's segregation of these children, there's violence against them because they're different. They kind of become very protectionist and violent in themselves, and they don't like, it's very interesting. And what's particularly interesting, and what I'm talking about partially in my paper, is how Wyndham presents like other countries' reactions, because Midwich isn't the only place that this happens. It happens in an Inuit village, it happens in a small town in Australia, I think, and I could get this wrong, a town in Malaysia, and also in the Soviet Union. And it's just interesting to see the parallels between how Wyndham perceives how different countries would react to this situation. And it kind of like, like really strongly feels like British, like post-colonial British superiorism, and it's really interesting, and I'm really excited to explore this in a paper. So the next book that I read this month was actually a birthday gift from my friend Cassie, and it is Fred Ullman's Reunion. This is really, really short. I think it's like 85 pages. It's like 80 pages. And it basically tells the story of a young Jewish boy in kind of Nazi Germany and his relationship with a German boy, and it's very, I don't know, it wasn't really my thing. I'm sorry, Cassie. It just, I get that it's a very important work, but it just, you know, it wasn't, it deals with issues of anti-Semitism. I'm not a big fan of like fiction that deals with the world wars. That's not a period I'm particularly interested in, especially not the way that they deal with them directly, because it's not a period of history that I like studying, and it's not particularly a period of history that I like reading about. I also don't really remember this book particularly well. I read this at the beginning of the month, and it's not, I'm like trying to remember things specifically to say about it, so that's how much of an impression this made on me. I'm like, I remember it was about two boys, one of them was Jewish and one of them wasn't, and it talked about like kind of the rise of Hitler and like, you know, social attitudes towards Jewish people, but I don't remember any particulars. So then I also did a buddy read with Ange, and we read Neal Zola's Germinal. Ange liked this a lot more than I did. This is actually fairly hefty, and this has been sitting on my shelf for ages, and I'm really glad to have gotten this off my TBR, because now I'm going to get rid of it. I did not love this book. This deals kind of with socialist issues and a mining community in France. What's interesting, and I talked about this a bit in my French literature TBR, I'll put a card up so you guys can click on that once this is done. This book was supposed to be continued in The Beast Within, but people really liked the protagonist in this book, and so Zola decided to not make him, because it's a killer in The Beast Within. I had a lot of issues with this book, so some trigger warnings. There is rape culture abundantly in this, and like you actually see the main love interest like being let off to be raped, and the protagonist is just like, well, she's saying no, but we all know girls mean yes. And that was at about page 100, and I think this is like a 500 page book, so that's not really a spoiler, and I could never really move past that. It made me angry, and I never moved past it. And I just, like, I also think I just don't do well with mining stories. I really didn't enjoy How Green Was My Valley, and this is another mining story that I've read this year, and I think mining stories just depress me. Did anybody else watch, like, Pit Pony growing up? This was a TV series that was on, and I think it traumatized me, and, like, also, animals die in this, just as a heads up. There are animals in the mine, and they do not survive. As with all mining stories, they normally end in some kind of disaster. Let's be realistic. I think that's part of what I don't like, is that there's always death, there's always, like, issues with the mines. Mines are not stable places, and you can predict that, and if there's ever an animal that's in the book, you know that's gonna die. You know it's gonna die, and you know how much I don't like it when animals die. I'm very protectionist of my animals. So yeah, it just, I didn't love it. Zola, this is my second Zola. Loved the first. This one, not so much. So yeah, that was, I think I gave it 2 stars. Ange ended up giving it 4. So I'm interested to kind of hear her thoughts, because we kind of both got busy and didn't really finish discussing it. So I'm curious to hear her thoughts on that. Then I did a buddy read with Tanya over at List Obsessed Reader, and it's been ages since we've done a buddy read, and she was kind of like, I want to read Dickens, and I was like, I kind of don't feel like reading Dickens at the moment. And then I was like, no, I'm gonna start a Dickens because I just have this compulsion to read more Dickens. And I read Dombey and Son. I know this is one of Katie's favorite books, and I went back and watched her video, and I think a lot of what she said is really interesting. She did a whole series where she goes through every single Dickens book called What the Dickens, because she's read his entire bibliography and she's fantastic, and go check out her channel. But Dombey and Son was a slow burn for me. It took me a really long time to become connected to the characters, and it wasn't until like halfway through that I finally was like, oh, okay. And I don't know if it was because I was listening to it on audiobook and the narrator wasn't my normal narrator, and it took me a while to get used to it because I hadn't listened to an audiobook for a while. But it was a real slow start. And to be fair, Tanya also felt the same way. Like, she also had trouble connecting with the characters, so we were both kind of complaining about this a bit. We were like, this is, you know, it's not, but midway through it gets really good. And I think for Dickens, this is one of his better portrayals of women. It definitely has a lot more nuance than he normally does in his portrayals of women. So I gave it 4 stars. It's more like a 3.5, but Goodreads doesn't have half stars. And I think this is one that I really want to revisit and kind of analyze, knowing the story ahead of time, because